The recording is in progress, and welcome everybody to this wonderful panel, which is an amazing collaboration between Boost and CDI, particularly CDI Services, the department that helps enterprises deliver on projects really. So we're going to talk a little bit about, ChatGPT. It's been exactly a year since that was launched. I just saw a tweet from good old Sam, um, that about a year ago they were like fiddling around, like making sure they were ready for launch and just like let's ship and see what happens. And they had no idea that this was going to be the thing that was going to happen. Um, we all know this story. It's the fastest growing app in history. 100 million users, shortest time to 100 million users. They raised a gazillion billion from Microsoft. And then, of course, recently all the drama around, what is it? We went from we're just doing research to, oh, we need a commercial product to fund the research to like, hey, that's actually doing quite well. Maybe let's do more commercial stuff. And then conflict amongst board members about the intention and the direction of the company. And it's going to be a great movie. I'm looking forward to it. And we haven't even started around it. So we have a great panel for everybody here today. And we're going to talk about sort of things that, what has this year been like? Or what kind of expectations do we have? What have we seen in the market? But also, not just at, individual level of how people are using it, but what does it mean for an enterprise? Like, well, how can I use this? What are the pitfalls? What have we seen people do already that worked? And maybe that wasn't so smart looking back at that stuff. So it's kind of going to be an open conversation. We've got a few questions prepared, and there is some sort of structure, but people that know us know that that doesn't mean much. We also have some questions in the poll. Let's see if we can start throwing that out there already, which is kind of nice as well. So then we kind of do these little polls and see where everybody's at and what your perspective is on that. There's also, there's the chat that everybody is using already very actively. There's also a special QA section. And we've all been on Zoom calls, so we know this. But if you have very specific questions, then it's always good to put them there, and we'll go over it. And some of the things we might address on the fly, others we might do later, whatever makes sense. But the first question that we put out: how would you rate your current understanding of LLMs and generative AI? And you can just select one, and we'll chat about that later. So before we do all of that, let's do a little round of introductions. My name is Hans. I'm just going to start with myself because I'm talking already. My name is Hans. I'm one of the founders here at CDI, Conversational Design Institute. So we teach people the skills of how to create better chatbots and voice applications. So if we really teach you sort of the fundamental principles, and then you go find a technology like Boost, and then you use that technology to sort of build, whatever you had in mind and wanted to do, what kind of interaction you wanted to have with customers or patients or employees. So Nena, well, who are you? Who are we dealing with?
All right. Thank you, Hans, for the floor. So I'm Nena van As. I'm the product and UX researcher here over at Boost AI in Norway. Means that the work that I do at Boost is mainly involved in figuring out how our customers, so the enterprises that are building chatbots, how they are building those chatbots and how they're interacting with our platform and with our products. I also do user research, right? Usability research, and some market and industry research on top of it. So you can call me a bit of a jack of all trades in a certain way. I have a background in human technology interaction and research, and chatbots have always had a fond spot in my heart. So very happy to be part of this panel.
Well, thank you so much for being here and making the time. And we'll go back to your colleague, boss, Henry.
Hi,
Henry.
thank you for having me. So I'm Henry Iverson, one of the co-founders in Boost. So at Boost AI, we help organizations to both automate, but also obviously enhance the customer experience across different channels. So that could be obviously if you want to call in and have a robot to meet you, maybe you want to chat, you want to be available on WhatsApp or whatever channel, we will have this platform, which we offer to organizations to obviously utilize the latest and greatest of generative AI, but also utilizing other different machine learning models to solve that problem. So nice to be here today.
Yeah, and last but certainly not least, Mr. Paul Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Hans, my colleague. I'm Paul Lewis. I'm running the CDI Services. It's basically the part of CDI that delivers strategy and implementation to customers. So we help customers worldwide with either starting up with chat or voice solutions, or we optimize or improve what's already there.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that something's there, somebody's starting. It's interesting dynamics. It kind of leads us to that first question already that I want to start off with, Henry, because I can imagine as with Boost is very like research driven in a way. Right? You've always been there from me looking on the outside in of how it was originated and the work that you're doing. So imagine you were already doing a lot of stuff preparing for this world of generative AI. So there's stuff on the roadmap. And then all of a sudden this thing happens in the world. How has that changed the roadmap, and how do you what was your perspective on it? How has that changed now, and how have you anticipated this? Well, to tell us the story, take us on a journey.
I think honestly it's been a pretty crazy year, to say at least. I think just general working in our space within AI, conversational AI, chatbots, and so on has been pretty crazy since we started 7 years ago. But obviously, I think it definitely accelerated a lot the last year. And I think again we had the roadmap going into November last year. But basically, when we saw ChatGPT come into the market, we obviously followed this space for a while. But I think kind of in terms of the quality, the accuracy was probably not where we really wanted to be. Also how accessible it was. But obviously everything was changed with OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And basically we kind of need to rethink our roadmap 100%. So I think we obviously been through iteration already now to utilize the technology. So we're obviously seeing a lot of potentials. But there's no doubt there is a lot of stuff going on in our industry in general. And I think a lot of people have probably a perception that, hey, can we just use the ChatGPT and tweak it a bit and then make it available for our business? And then I think you kind of forget also some of the, if you look at the conversation between humans, it's obviously there's a lot of components to it. And if you only use ChatGPT, which I think is obviously great for some part of the conversation, but not everything. And I think that kind of the thing we are seeing now that, okay, we kind of look at more like a technology enabler for part of the conversation. Kind of you're building up a conversation based on Lego blocks, basically. Sometimes you need the generative AI to help you to make it more natural conversation, because I think some of the challenges with this technology in the past it's a bit rigid when you build up the conversation. You're not really able to kind of engage it in a human-like way, which people want. But then sometimes it's just a simple yes or no question, and then you don't really need generative AI to do that. So it's kind of using that combination. I think what we have seen is the best way to do it. So we're kind of using different models. So it could be more the machine learning models we've been using for ChatGPT for chatbots for a while, but then also using generative AI to test it out. But it's also honestly a bit testing to see how we can build guardrails around it, because there's still a challenge about hallucination, for example. And if you work with like a lot of the customers we do within bank and government and so on, like any risk for hallucination is pretty much a no-go.
Yeah,
that's also something I need to keep in mind, that you obviously use the right technology or tool for the right job, but then also make sure that how do we do this in a safe and reliant way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Every organization has their own tolerance for risk, and particularly these enterprise deployments. There's not a lot of tolerance for it. And do you think now that because you were already doing that, it's accelerated, has that acceleration forced you to solve some very complex problems in a very efficient way that maybe otherwise you just put in the freezer, we'll look at it later, we'll shelf it a little bit, where all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, it's making you realize that something is possible that wasn't maybe before you hadn't figured out?
I think the biggest thing for me has been kind of just around the conversational design, which I think you guys also pretty much relate to. I think just kind of being able to have a bit more, say, human-like conversation, engaging with the customers in a completely different way. Obviously, there is some kind of guardrails you need to put into that conversation, but that is a thing we really kind of are very bullish on, I would say, in general. Because again, understanding the topic of the question, as we call intents, is pretty like straightforward, I think, traditionally to do. But then how do you drive the conversation to like like a conversation where we obviously can give advice. Maybe we can do upselling of products, or just in general do more advanced troubleshooting. It's not been that easy to do. It's been possible to do it, but it definitely required a lot of resources. Now it's much easier to do it because you kind of give the bot more general instructions instead of giving them all the detailed instructions you need to do before. And I think that part is, I think, pretty amazing from my side, at least.
Yeah.
Can
No. Yeah.
Yes, because actually, talking about the thing that surprised me most about the functionalities that LLMs have brought to the table, if we're talking about a conversational design approach, the thing that struck me most was how much more interesting or easy it has become to do form filling. And I know form filling from a research point of view or an academic point of view, form filling is almost like a derogatory term. It's like, yeah, why would you want to do form filling when you can have natural conversation? But we all know that form filling is what yields a lot of value, right, for use cases in bots. And trying to build this flow with pre-built blocks with all the potential loops and back to the places where people might change their minds or say, oh, actually, it's not 3 people, it's 4 people. Like trying to build that out with strict blocks ahead of time is just really, really challenging. And now with LLMs, you can actually skip thinking about how am I going to build this, and you can start thinking more about the goal of that interaction again. And that I really, really, really enjoy a lot.
Yeah, so there's you see now with the LLMs is that there's certain things that just we need to do them because they're valuable for the business, but they're a time suck to do it well. And now LLMs make that easier, giving us freedom to do more valuable things. Is that stuff that you recognize in the work that you're doing, Paul, that where all of a sudden teams have more time now to do more valuable work building these bots and kind of bringing them to a higher level because some of the other stuff is taken care of?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's changed so much. I mean, if I also, I mean, of course, I'm more concerned or curious what it does to the things we are doing today, and it certainly changed the requirements of our team, our staff. Originally we had people busy with conversation design, AI training, the way we all designed it a while ago. And suddenly these roles are changing. Someone who was originally very busy with conversation design now suddenly needs to focus more on checking things that are perhaps designed by another tool. I mean, it's still the same value, but you're doing a different thing. And an AI trainer that used to, let's say, was busy with optimizing things is now busy with safeguarding things and, for example, the quality of data sources. So the roles are really changing with all these possibilities, which is something that really, interesting.
So I always say that with conversation design, it's like it's a good conversation still looks the same, but now it's like, did you write it or are you making sure that the design patterns are in there? Yeah, and let's go to the next one. Kind of, we looked at the impact of generative AI, and I'm directing you as Nena here, and then everybody can follow. What are some of the pitfalls that what's the impact of generative AI in an enterprise around expectation, what we feel is possible, etc. And then also, what are some of the pitfalls that we might encounter as an enterprise that are easy to overlook, some blind spots perhaps that you've already encountered now in this 1 year?
Well, I mean, I'm also looking at the poll questions, right? So the answers coming in, right? I'm not surprised to see factual accuracy racing to the top. I don't know actually if everyone in the audience can see the results yet, but pitfalls are all about control. Right? We've all seen the capabilities of LLMs. I think we've all been amazed by the capabilities of LLMs, but control is going to be the big word for me, at least in 2024, because when we're thinking about control, it's not always clear what we mean with control. Right? If you're thinking about controlling the output, then one of the easiest things to think is factual accuracy. Second would be legal. Like, is the thing that the bot is saying going to be legal or criminalized? Because then we definitely don't want it to say that. But then there's also a level of sort of desirability of that output. Is the text going to be super long? Is it going to use words that the end users don't understand? How are we influencing all those like different levels of output? I think that's a really, really challenging but exciting question to sink our teeth into. And the pitfall when it comes to talking to customers about this is that these like nuances of control are not always as clear to customers who might be stuck more on the level of a legal point of view. Like it just needs to pass the legal team, right?
Yeah.
And then they do not necessarily see the different levels of control that might be needed to actually really properly guardrail this stuff.
Yeah, so you got different stakeholders that all have their own opinion on quality, and they all have, when it's sort of breach sort of the rules that they have, there's a different process and different protocol, and they have different ways in a way. That's like, if legal gets flagged, that's immediately a red flag. Where maybe the prompt was a little too long that went out. It's okay, it's not great, but
Exactly.
we just want to know it. I've definitely see those issues too as well. And Paul, what's your take on this?
Well, there's a related, yes, so control, of course, super important, but there's a related topic, I think, to this. So imagine even if you have control and you sort of solve that issue or somehow made it to a point that you accept it, then there's still something like you need consistency across channels. So imagine you're a company working on many channels with many instruments. And I think we all know by now that a large language model, generative AI, it's kind of unpredictable. It can be controlled, and maybe you like what it's saying, but in a way, it's unpredictable. You don't know what the algorithm is going to do. And if you then, for example, if you have a search and a chat solution next to each other, and the chat solution uses Gen AI to produce what it needs to produce, but your search channel is working in another way, then you really run into the, let's say, potential problem that you have a disconnected experience from your customers. They don't understand that they're getting this answer there and another answer somewhere else. It's not what you want. So that's another interesting related problem, I would say, to control.
Yeah, so you'd have like a holistic approach to this, where even though a Gen AI solution might actually take all the data and base its answers on that, it actually is very limited in sort of where it sits in the journey. So you need to consider all of it. It gets very multi-layered quickly. But Henry, what's your take?
I definitely need to agree here in terms of like the control part, and I cannot stress that enough, because I think that's obviously what you will get with I would say a platform and an application on top of this generative AI technology, is that you get control. Do you really want to know what your bot answer every time or not? That's kind of the consideration you need to take. And I think another important point is also around like this data quality. Like the generative AI LLM is not obviously better than the data you give it. And then I think there was a lot of like, I don't know, maybe confusing in terms of like, okay, if we just put the AI into our data source and then it will figure out everything. Surprise, it doesn't. So you really need to be able to kind of, what is the data quality we have on the back end? How can we actually tie that up to what we have in terms of documentation, knowledge base, and so on? And again, you can obviously use AI to help you in a lot of this work. I worked recently with the customer on an internal use case. So basically we're automating HR and IT's questions and so on. And then we kind of use their internal intranet as kind of the source of data. So we didn't want the generative AI to go out on the web to find the information, obviously restricted to this area. But then we learned that actually 60% of the information I have in intranet was outdated. So then obviously that means that you need to do some work. We can obviously look at how old the articles are, and there's definitely some stuff you can do. But I think it's just also important that like it's not really, the AI is not going to be in silver bullet in terms of the content you have available. I think you really need to think about that from a holistic point of view. What type of content do we have available, and how do we start using it across different channels?
I can go for it, Paul.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Because I wanted to connect this back to what you were saying about the new requirements for roles, right? For people in the teams. Like, this is exactly the kind of work, knowledge management work. Do we know where the truth lives? What's our information structure? Where is which data? Also, for the example of having a search result and a chat result, are they both even looking at the same source, right? And that's the kind of work that I definitely would envision that we're going to need more hands-on in the future.
Yeah. The interesting question here. So let's see if we should probably address this now. So what do we think? Sorry, Richard, I'm skipping you. I'm going to go to Margaret's question here. Thoughts on knowledge bases ontologies as truth reference points for LLMs to put their lovely generation on top of. Then I guess is that then a RAG model in general? Is this even using an ontology on top of a RAG, on top of that knowledge base to then use an LLM on top of? Nana, you're nodding your head,
And I
so
give
this
it
is
a
going
shot.
to you. Yeah.
I know. Like going forward, and one thing that might be reconsidered. I mean, we're doing this hybrid approach, right? So you have an intent-based approach, maybe that we can call that very derogatory, the old world, and then we're looking at a new world where perhaps intents might not play a role for predictions necessarily, but we are going to need this information structure. One way or another, you need to instruct a chat or an agent what it should answer and what it should not. So you're still going to need some sort of a backbone or a spine to connect the different models to connect the different sources to. Like, we are still going to need some sort of structure. I just don't know what that shape will be yet.
Yeah, because you see sort of a lot of people that are now looking at like, oh, can we start a business line that all we got to do is restructure the content in a knowledge base and write it in Markdown because that works better. But it's like, no, there needs to be an all-encompassing ontology for the organization to connect all that. But then you're looking at a very complicated stack, which
I think just an important point on that one. It could probably feels like a very daunting task to do all these things. Then again, there's also a possibility to start small. There's definitely things you can do today to kind of start that journey. Obviously, we know it's going to take some time to kind of get to kind of the ideal perfect state, if that's even possible at all. I think that's probably a few years down the road. But again, there's a lot of things you can do today just to kind of look at the content management and start small with maybe like one use case or a couple of use cases around internally, external facing, and so on. And you can start kind of building up that expertise you need. Because I think also within conversational AI in general, you also need to have maybe a bit different content than you already have documented with a lot of information, like basically a lot of like PDFs explaining one problem. We obviously need to be able to derive what's relevant and what's not relevant for that specific question and make sense of it. But there's a lot of things you can do today. That's the best part.
Yeah, and you can't have a webinar and not bring up the Gartner hype cycle. So I believe the first hype cycle had chatbots on there, and it was like, yeah, that's going to be amazing. Give it a couple of years. Now, I think, is it kind of the case with ChatGPT where all of a sudden we start believing in that dream again? It's like, oh, maybe it is possible, but now the stuff we're talking about now has the problem just kind of moved to this part of the equation where it's like, yeah, technically we can now understand what people say, but now we're dealing with this problem, and this problem is just as complicated, or is how solvable is this?
Solvable. That's a big question.
Yeah,
But
well, and it's not even on our list. I just threw it out there, but the reason is we agree too much. I just gotta, get people rattled a little bit.
Honestly,
solvable is a big word. Yeah.
Yes, but personally, when ChatGPT launched, I was initially just very frustrated because like I was doing all this nice work. We had plans for the future, and now everything is like thrown back over. Also in the research world, where we had like grant applications that needed rewriting, everything needed to do something with LLMs one way or another. So that was definitely peak hype cycle. But I really feel that in the last year, everyone who has tried this tech out has come to the realization like it's not a silver bullet.
And I think a super important point there is just that like a lot of chatbots out there was actually working before ChatGPT. So obviously we kind of now there's definitely much more visibility around this space in general. People are looking to invest in this technology, but it worked before. We had project where we had about 90-95% accuracy, so it actually understood the question in 90 to 95% of the times. And then not all of those conversations was obviously automated directly. Some of them were handed to a human because of the complexity, but we still were able to resolve a lot of the question, at least 15%. So again, I think this is obviously putting a lot of injection in terms of like the smartness, and we can obviously bring it even higher in terms of accuracy and quality and so on. And we can also do more use cases, which I think is also one of the beauties here, and also accelerate how fast you can go to market with solutions, which is maybe the biggest benefit in my view, that you don't need to spend like 3 or 4 months anymore to set up a project. Now you can actually do this in days or weeks, depending on the scope.
Yeah, you can move a lot faster with LLMs, and if you know what you're doing, you can create a lot of value very quickly. But then if you don't really know what you're doing, you can also harm it pretty quickly, I'd say. What I find interesting here in this poll is like, what do you hope to achieve with large language models? A lot of people say improve customer service. So we want this thing to talk to people a lot of times. But I think everybody that's working now in this field is saying that actually there's a lot of value maybe around the actual conversation. So we want to innovate services or become a smarter business of like doing summaries of call center logs and doing all this and using it to analyze the data and stuff like that, rather than just having to talk to people with the risks of hallucinations, etc. Kind of want to go to you, Paul, your background in management consulting as well. When you hear all of this and what you've seen in this year, when you're an executive at a large public company and you have all these inflated expectations and you got all these customers, but you're always focused on bringing down costs. What are some of the things that you feel should be keeping those people up at night? What kind of conversations should they be having, short, long term? Like, how do you go about these complex things?
Yeah, it is super interesting. There is something funny going on. I mean, we're all sitting on this pot of gold, with many possibilities. And if we talk about it, then we're all curious, enthusiastic, and we see what you can do. But the funny thing about companies is, we all know the layers. For example, the risk tolerance. The higher up you go, the lower the level of risk tolerance, and the lowest level is in the supervisory board. They hate risks. Now, the problem that we're seeing these days is that, let's say, we see it at our customers, but certain studies confirm this, that more than half of the current executives out there, they really discourage the use of Gen AI. Let that sink in. So, discourage the use of Gen AI. And let me be clear what it means. It means two things. Also, the companies that are experimenting, it doesn't mean they're going to use it or going to do anything with it. Yeah. So there are two main reasons for that, let's say, that attitude. They don't fully understand it. Or they're experimenting with it, but they feel that they're not ready for it. There are no policies in place, and they're not prepared. The workforce is not prepared. And if you then zoom in on the main concerns of a board member, which I think is completely understandable, one problem is what I call the black box problem. Yeah. So, I mean, because a board is used to, they want to understand everything, because then they can make a decision, then they know they're in control. Well, in this case, they don't understand it. So there's limited traceability of sources, privacy is often compromised, and it's unpredictable outcomes. So that's a black box. Nobody likes that in the top of a company. And the other problem is they don't know how to act. So they're unclear investment priorities, because the business case is messed up. In the old days, the business case was easy. Suddenly it's messed up. Their own responsibility is unclear. You're in the board. So who's responsible for this? The CIO? Well, the CIO is a very smart guy, but the poor guy now
person doesn't have to be a guy, a smart person.
Yeah, well, a smart person. Sorry, but we sometimes say hi guys, and then it's a room full of. So it's unclear what the responsibilities are in that board, and there's no real strategy for responsible for generative AI. So what we see today is that we see hesitation, and it's not that bad, because companies that are experimenting, it still means a lot of things are going on, a lot of business, and there's a lot happening. But to really use it and to really make that decision is not here today for many companies. Well, and there's maybe the last thing to say about this. of course, there's a big difference between industries and regions. I mean, healthcare, you could say, well, they're really struggling with this for obvious reasons. Industry and banking, financial institutions, insurance companies, they're all experimenting, but not really implementing it yet. And I would say telecommunications, they're the leaders of the pack, and especially in North America. So there are big differences all over the world, also in that respect.
Do you see that too, Henry, from the clients that the conversations that you have with people higher up, that sort of those considerations that Paul's mentioning?
Yeah, I think it's also pretty spot on in terms of the verticals and industries. Definitely investing a lot in this because, again, they want to be competitive for the future. I think, honestly, they also struggle a bit how to actually use this technology. And they also come into kind of a classical problem. Do I want to build it or do I want to buy it? Again, you can obviously build a lot of like custom models based on OpenAI technology. But again, that's going to be very costly. It's going to take time to get to market. And do you really want to have internal software team develop these things? So that's, I think, some of the trouble they have. And also, who do they look for advice? Do they need to go to the IT team? Will the IT team take charge of this and kind of own this project? Obviously needs to be driven by business, because at the end of the day, it needs to be some business outcome. So I think they all, as every organization we work with are definitely experimenting with this technology in one way or another. But again, I think most of them are still in a very early stage in terms of making something into production, which obviously examples though. And I think just last point in terms of people, organization using the Boost AI platform, we obviously have generative AI capabilities available. And it's definitely been North America, and I think also South America, been kind of the most advanced one of using this technology in production. Yeah. Mostly now it's for fallback when you have a very complex questions. You can use it to fall back and use generative AI to make sense of it, because that's something it does really well. But I think they've definitely been leading that implementation. Maybe there is, I would say, a higher risk for a higher appetite for risk, I think maybe. And also the fact that OpenAI has been hosted in the US, I think also made a difference in terms of adoption. But again, we're definitely seeing kind of now Nordic and also European organizations doing proof of concept, and also probably will be in production in a few months.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now I'm going to follow up with a question on that, because I think you kind of mentioned it before, because you said, oh, the bots, they actually work, and now we get hype on wanting to do this, and there's a question here as well. Like, do you see people that have a perfectly working bots, they're trying to now do Gen AI, where it's almost like they're ruining the great work that's already been done? Do you see that with some of their clients, where that, well, I guess you're preventing them, but where you kind of see that as the risk is like, no, we've got something good going. No need to touch this? Or those conversations?
I cannot mention name though, but we've definitely seen a few, maybe a couple examples where they basically, hey, like, we can probably build something better ourselves. Our IT team is all over this. This is fantastic, cool, and I understand this is cool technology, and everyone want to work with it. So then we don't really need the Boost AI solution anymore. But I think kind of the conclusion all of them have come to is, okay, there's a lot of like boring stuff you get it on a platform, like role management. You need to make sure you take care of the data in the right way. You also want to control the content, have guardrails and so on. All these things you kind of need to build on top of it if you're going to use OpenAI technology. So I think that's still, I think, I would say, a challenge maybe in the marketplace currently. But when people kind of get first-hand experience on this is something they learn. But then to Paul's point, like, how do we get the C-level people and the leadership to actually understand this? They are probably not going to sit down and build bots from scratch using OpenAI technology. So it's just, I think that education part is going to be crucial going forward.
Well, and it's a cultural thing too. So the interesting thing is, of course, people try to understand, so why is North America, why is that then happening a bit faster, or is that, why is the difference there? And what you see is that, to be successful, somewhat successful in this area, you need money, you need partners, and you need talent. But the common denominator in the end is money. And it's an interesting cultural dynamic of North American companies that, they just, the dynamics, everything goes a bit faster, decisions are made faster, money is putting money in is a bit easier, and they're bolder. And I would say, so it's also an interesting cultural phenomenon that some North Americans companies are moving faster.
Yeah, and I maybe want to disagree on this point. I know Hans loves.
Good. Yeah, finally.
Yeah, we need that.
Yeah, just waiting for the right opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair point, Paul. But I think maybe the biggest thing I'm seeing, at least in Europe, is everything around this, like the data, how you treat the data. I think that's the reason it takes so much more time to get that accepted organization we work with, because obviously they're looking from the GDPR perspective. They're obviously looking at how they make sure that nothing of their data is being trained on other models and so on. Obviously, sending data to US is pretty much a no-go. Even if there is a way to do it, it's still very difficult for most organizations to accept that. So I think that's kind of been the biggest thing from my side. And also in terms of hosting, yes, Azure also have hosting now. Azure will also have services around this and so on. But that's definitely been lagging a bit compared to the US, which I think is maybe the biggest reason.
Yeah, I can.
Then the question is it American boldness or is it recklessness, right? I guess that's the European perspective. And then Nina, I see a question in the chat that I think you are perfectly suited for. As I am an enterprise and have all these customers that are talking to ChatGPT, and they have now, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, they're like, oh, stupid chatbot. Now all of a sudden they have the impression that chatbots are like mega smart. How do you manage those kinds of? How do you either meet those expectations or how do you manage them? How do you balance it out? What's your learning from the year?
Well, that's indeed one of the big challenges also going forward, right? It's been both a blessing and a curse. Because I think whereas maybe a lot of organizations before weren't that interested in getting a chatbot because they've seen bad examples or examples that just didn't work, ChatGPT definitely reinvigorated that interest. So we have many enterprises that are now interested in getting bots, but those inflated expectations, they put a lot of pressure on, for example, us as vendors to just make a ChatGPT for them, which connects to the point of educating them on what it actually means to do that, and that ChatGPT is built with a lot of investment money, right? So it's not going to be an overnight project. And on top of that, it also puts this weird pressure on us developing features. Because on one hand, everyone wants to have LLM features in this space. If you have a vendor that doesn't offer LLM-based features, you run a risk of just being disregarded, right? But at the same time, no one is ready, or not a lot of companies are ready to start using it, as we just discussed. So that makes it really difficult from a product research point of view to get actual input from these companies and from enterprise and from intended users on how to design these features. So it's like we're running a race, but we have to look over our shoulder the entire time to make sure that we know where the finish line is. It's a weird conundrum.
That is interesting. As you're talking, I can imagine a lot of maybe organizations that were creating chatbots. They were struggling with that, and then it's not the technology that makes it difficult. It's like they don't have the right team, they don't have the right people, they don't have the right buy-in, they don't really know how to tell the story internally, and then all of a sudden you get this magic technology where they think, oh, actually that solves this problem, but they're actually the ones that are in the worst position to start playing with this. So it's the ones that are doing the old school stuff very well are in the great position to start doing this. That's kind of like so yeah, if you weren't doing well before, boy, it must be tough now.
Well, you have a bit of a learning curve ahead of you, but at the same time, you also have a benefit of not having existing data or existing work, because that can also function as an anchor, right? That keeps you in the old world and makes it harder to move to the new one.
Are we already talk about the old world now? Is that where we go?
Sorry, yeah, fair enough. I'm getting ahead of myself.
A bit with that way of it.
No, but that's like, I guess that was one of my questions too. It's like 2 years, maybe 1 year from now, 2-3 years from now, if we look back at this webinar, are we going to look like a bunch of idiots? It's just kind of remember people are like, oh, why do I need a mobile phone? So stupid.
Well, this is the certainty, Hans. This is the certainty.
But yeah, no, but does like, are we? Is what we're saying making any sense looking back? It seems like it, but we don't know. Like how far, how quickly is this going to go, and how far is it going to go? Who wants to do some predictions? Is everybody 3 years from now only running LLM powered chatbots, running in real time, fully integrated on every channel, contextual, delightful, amazable? No, Nana
Yeah.
says no. I think Nana's like, I'm not even going near this. Henry,
No,
what do you
but I
think?
don't think so. I don't think so. Like the pace of movement, especially when you're talking about big organizations, that just that alone would make it hard to realize that in a year, right?
Yeah, but we can say something about the near future. I mean, Hans, you're right. 1 year from now, in this world, 1 year from now, it's very far away. But I think we can say something about the near future. I mean, we basically what you see, there are two ways forward for most companies, and I think Henry, you already mentioned this. One way is to make the application rather small. So choose an area where it's not too risky, make it smaller, make it less ominous, and that might work for some companies. But the other way is to go for even smaller LLMs themselves. Yeah? So I think a trend that is coming at us is I think it's called edge device LLMs. So basically LLMs that are optimized to run on local devices, like phones, and trained on much smaller data sets. Well, that I think is a smart way forward for the near future, because then you're really de-risking the thing. Of course, it limits the possibilities, but it's still it overcomes some of the other risks that we all see, and we don't know what to do with it. So I think that's coming, and had to use these foundational big models operated by companies like Meta and Google. That's risky, and we really don't know what's coming out of it. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, but we don't know yet. But you could de-risk it by going smaller in both directions.
Risk seems to be the main theme, right? There's the risk of hallucinations, there's the risk of bad user experiences, there's the risk of just say an illegal stuff, but there's also massively the risk of dependency on big tech. So all of those things are kind of that, like once risk is not solved, or if risk is not solved, then it's just going to move slow, and it's very difficult to see where that holy grail is, perhaps. But risk mitigation seems to be the key word.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, no, please, yes, and please disagree with it.
No, actually,
I invite
I'm
you
gonna agree.
cordially
I'm
to
gonna agree
disagree.
with Paul, because I really like the idea of the smaller models, also from, for example, environmental point of view, right? I mean, these really big foundational models are like a huge hammer, and everything is looking like a nail right now. But maybe if we can move towards thinking about these more smaller, segmented, more precise models that don't have to run on these huge server farms as well, or use as much water for cooling, that also has obvious environmental benefits next to dependency reduction.
Yeah.
But it's a bit confusing, because at the same time it's so funny. So yes, I think that's definitely a way forward, but at the same time the possibilities keep growing. I mean, you have, for example, multimodal LLMs that can simultaneously handle text, images, and audio data. So it gets, it can do more and more and more, and at the same time we're thinking about smaller and simpler, which is like, well, very interesting where that will go. But it's hard to come.
I see, and I'll let Henry answer this because it's kind of building on top of this. Will responsible AI be taken seriously by corporations? Because programs for ESG and DEI are really unraveling and not really working out, because there's no accountability. People, if it's a decision between profit and doing good, it's difficult. What do you like? Can you bring that into this discussion that we're having as well? And what's your thoughts about that?
I think Jacques, the LLM obviously talk about like the small and bigger ones and so on. I think it definitely have some challenges with the smaller ones, because again, you're going to lose out a lot of functionalities. Again, some of the bigger ones now investing a lot of money into those to make it work, obviously multimodal and so on. So that means that you're getting a lot of functionalities. And yes, it's a good argument that you don't need everything, but still the quality of what you're getting today is pretty good though. And I think also in terms of responsible AI, ethical AI, how do we explain that and so on? I think the more we kind of have separate smaller LLMs, then again, do we really have the capacity to build out all these aspects of those LLMs on our own, or do we want to do that as kind of as a bigger initiative? But again, then the flip side will obviously be that there's going to be some tech giants owning that kind of data and those models, which is obviously also the flip side of it. So I think at least kind of how we see at the Boost is like we definitely would want to be agnostic in terms of the LLM out there. We obviously know that OpenAI is pretty much leading the pack right now, especially for the things we needed to do. But again, we will expect others to come later on.
Yeah. Let's see if we thank you for that. Let's see if we have a few more. I'll go to the official QA things. Question from Richard Miller: what design tools do you think best translates from traditional chatbot design to LLM design? I think a lot of platforms, if you look at a tool like Boost, it's very user friendly. I don't think you need anything else but Boost. If you've got your intent bots, you want to bring in some Gen AI, it just works. Do not go shopping anywhere. Put something else on your Christmas list. Let's see, what else do we have? Could you give some examples of use cases which will be actually good for creating bots with Gen AI, and what scenarios would definitely not be right? I think we've talked about a bunch of these things, right? Where it's like high risk, health, legal, compliance, all those things, do not go near it. So where accuracy and outcome, where it's crucial that those are spot on, you don't want to go near that. And then if it requires lots of integrations and transactional stuff on the side, it adds another layer of complexity. Whereas if you have an open use, what are the opening hours? Or if you take it outside of an enterprise, let's say I want to make a chatbot that can talk to me about the Kardashians. Yes, that popped into my head. I'm sorry. But I could go on social media and I could use all that data and I could build a chatbot and it could talk about that. And if that's a use case that you can work with, then it doesn't matter if the information isn't right. So I think that's kind of where you look at it, like outcome and accuracy. How important is it that we score high on those? And if you score very high, you're probably looking more at an intent-based bot. If it's not that important, then you can go to more Gen AI, and then you sort of set your own threshold.
The degree of flexibility that you need in the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So maybe somewhere in the middle are the cases like the form filling cases. Like if you're in a big insurance company and your customers struggle to find the correct forms to make their claims, that's a great candidate for an LLM-based one that can go back and forward through this decision process to help them end up at the right one.
I think important point is just, I think most of the generative AI LLM use cases right now is usually the human in the loop.
Yeah.
I think these kind of external chatbots where you have like full automation, where you talk directly to customers, that's probably where you want to restrict a bit usage of the generative AI for now, at least. You can obviously use it to fallback and so on, but you don't want it to control the whole conversation. But if you look at like internal facing, could also be like an agent assist where you're kind of listening into the call from a customer rep and to a customer, then obviously you have a human to kind of approve the responses. At least for now, I think that's the way to go, because there is going to be some mistakes being done. I think the upside is fantastic because you get fantastic responses sometimes, but then you also get some really bad responses. So I think to kind of level that out, you definitely need to have a human to make the judgment if this is something I want to present for the customer or not.
Yeah, it's a productivity tool for chatbot creators for a large part as well, then, right?
Yeah, the market is also going to help things. So the thing now is that if we talk about chatbots and the risks and why not, then we are always focusing on the company that makes it or uses it or is going to use it. But sometimes you should also turn it around and think about the consumers or the customers or employees that are using that kind of product. I think in the near future they will also get used to a bit more let's say flexibility, and that they also we as customers or we as employees, I think we're also going to learn to accept that not everything is correct or not everything is right or not everything is exactly how it should be, because that we are now used to, we are now angry at chatbots not saying the right thing because it's designed by someone. But if it's not designed by someone but just generates stuff, then maybe you're in over time you get a little bit used to this. And then the hard boundary is, does it become illegal, or does it, is the risk too high to do those kind of things? But in a lot of areas there is, the risk is not so high. The risk is giving wrong information. Well,
Maybe I'm being a bit too much of a skeptic here, but I think if we have to rely on people questioning information that they see, then
Well,
I don't know.
well, you
So
never know.
well, we're getting to the end. There's one important question, of course, from our perspective that we need to answer here from Julian Wolf, who recently graduated in conversation design. Am I out of a job? What does this mean? Right. And I think some people say, oh, conversation design, that's like, oh, you're sitting down and you're writing all the dialogues. And I think, yeah, if that's long term, yeah, you might be looking elsewhere. But I think if you look at what is conversation design, it's like you're thinking about at large scale what kind of conversations you want to have with people as an enterprise, and you want to use technology to build that, right, to power that and get the scale. So thinking about, do I need to use Gen AI for this particular use case? Do I need to use intent model for this particular use case? Does the output look any way I want it to be? Does it have the right design patterns? Is it compliant? All those complex problems that we're sort of talking about today, that is conversation design. So I think there's some misconception for some people where it's like, oh no, isn't that the, how we started a couple of years ago? Oh, that's the poet in the room that writes all the dialogues. And that's still, I think, the romantic idea, but eventually it's the person that is it, that's figuring out how do we want to use this technology in a human-centered and inclusive, goal-oriented way so that it's valuable for both the business and the people interacting with it. So yes, you have a job, it's okay. And which tasks and tools do we need? Let's see. There's one company that comes to mind. Only one. Only one. Which one would it be? No, I would say go look at Boost. They're friendly people. They're really good. They have a beautiful office. If it's still the same, it's been a long time. I've been there once, a long time ago. Let's see if we've got a few more minutes. Let's see if there's one last questions. Richard Miller is very active. Bots that are 80% good is not very good. That's good. Overall, you expect the industry as it is keep expanding. Yeah, so conversation, is the industry going to grow, and is the cost of LLMs going to continue to go down? Yes, I would say so. And then there's two parts. It's like, if you look at conversational AI, there are the conversations that are currently existing that you could be automating, but once you figure that out, you're going to start looking at currently non-existing conversations where you could also use it. And then you have all the other use cases of LLMs, of course, around this as well. So this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And everybody here on this webinar, you are probably working in this field. If you're just here to figure out if it's something for you, this is, yeah, if you want to become a lawyer or a conversational AI industry, it's probably a better bet. It's more fun in general. But yeah, it's a great career opportunity. And this will keep growing. You need tools, and then you need a skill set. And I know what kind of tool I would use, but Henry, where would you go and learn about these things?
Where can I go learn about these things? Where can I go?
Yeah. Let's see. I see one very long question here, and from Sean Kelshaw. And we have 2 more minutes. Nina, I'm going to give you the task to read it really quickly. And yeah, okay, we heard earlier Nina's comment about how AI LLMs are removing the need for complex mapping of conditional logic, kind of, sort of. We also heard Hans mention that those businesses have been keeping up with documentation and process flow, boxes and arrows, are in a good position to adopt and implement LLMs. How important are boxes and arrows? Personally, I find them to be one of the most misunderstood and abused artifacts in all of UX. It's a dry and boring question, but how important are boxes and arrows and artifacts for all this new tech coming into focus? It appears Boost accommodates for these artifacts.
Well, I would say boxes and arrows are going to be the future, if I may. But like that's going to be, so we're no longer going to focus on how are those boxes and arrows colored in. We're going to focus on where are they pointing and what are they connecting, right? And if anything, then being a platform vendor or being a conversational AI vendor means that we have to provide just that, right? So that's what we do.
Beautiful closing words. I would like to thank everybody. We still have 123 people here. Isn't that cool? 123 people, and let's see if we got a Q in the meantime, because I think we got all the other letters. We definitely need some. No, we need someone with a Q, and then we would have all the letters of the alphabet present in this webinar. No, so thank you, Henry, Nina, Paul, for being here today and sharing your wisdom and boosting us with wisdom around conversational AI, LLMs, and it's the 1 year anniversary of the launch of ChatGPT. I just read that Sam Altman is currently CEO of OpenAI. Oh wait, no, he's not. Oh wait, he is. Yes, no, yeah, there he goes. Yeah, no, yeah, there he is. We'll see where this takes us. Thank you all for being here, for your beautiful questions and your presence, and being active in the chat and turning this into a wonderful event. Thank you so much. And
Thanks for moderating it.
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you give me a camera and I go. That's what I do. Thank
Okay.
you all. And if you want to know more, both Boost has a website, CDI has a website. You can go and say hello and talk to them. Always happy to have a chat for all your LM needs. But sometimes people just need to talk and share your story. That's fine too. Also, if you've got a chatbot live and you're like, oh, it's good enough, why don't you check in? We've got this really cool thing where we do sort of a review, and it's just free. We have a look at the chatbot, say like, here's a little report card. Maybe it's not consistent enough, or maybe it's not really clear enough, or maybe use a little more active language. Why don't you work on your greetings a little bit? We can help with that too. So thank you all for being here. You've been wonderful. Thank you to the beautiful people of Boost making this possible and sharing the story and learning about your roadmaps and what you've been doing and what the year has been like for you. And my best goes out to Sam Altman and his friends at OpenAI.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thanks.
Everyone, thanks, Hans.
Bye-bye.